Welcome everyone to Soul Talk. I am your host Soul, and I'm here joined by the guy responsible for changing my instrument in marching band in college from clarinet to baritone. Dakota, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. A little cold, which, as some of you may know, that Kentucky is a lot colder than Florida, so
Yes.
it sucks sometimes. But
Yeah, I used to be able to deal with that coldness a little bit better. It took me 9 years to get used to the Kentucky cold, and then in 6 months coming back to Florida, I got used to the warm weather again. And when I went to Shanice's graduation, I was like, it's freezing in May. But anyways, we're here talking about things that we've recently read, watched, played, etc. It could be things that have recently come out or things that are several years old. So let's get started. Our first topic is what is our recent reads? So Dakota, what have you recently read this past week?
so other than my books for my master's class that I'm taking, I kind of went off of it, and I actually have a copy of it right here. There's a book called Annoyed Grunt, and I think yes, um, it's a book about poems that's really cool. It speaks as if it was a Simpsons character,
Oh,
and
nice.
the stories it's hilarious, especially if you try and read it like them. The stories are very deep and makes you think out of something that's been the longest running cartoon show. How deep that show can be. It's intense. Um, it's just kind of going back and reflecting on some of the things that this book of poems presents. Um, and then I haven't read it yet, but we had a PD with this man named Stephen Nifley, and he talked a lot about um, issues with cultural differences within the school, within society, and he has a book called Out of Knowledge of Self that kind of talks about Black masculinity, the psychology and treatment that African Americans, especially male African Americans, have faced throughout history, and especially throughout America's history. That I kind of I want to read, I want to delve into because I'm have not experienced that, and I just want to be aware of everything that has happened and all of that stuff.
And for those who don't know, Dakota is a wonderful music teacher up there in Kentucky. And just like all other teachers right now, has had to learn how to teach during COVID. So I know that has been pretty hard for you and for teachers all across the US. And the other comment I have is that all of us who are not Black, even if we are of different minorities, of me, myself being Latino, Dakota himself being gay, that we've dealt with discrimination in different ways, but we still don't have the same experience that Black people have in the US. And so I think the best way is to get more knowledgeable and read books about those experiences and talk to people about those experiences. So that you put that book on my radar and I didn't even know about it.
It,
But oh, go ahead.
I, I was gonna say the one of the authors of the book. He, like I said, in our PD, was very knowledgeable about everything, and some of the things he mentioned, just things that people joke around and say that are not as okay as we thought they were. It was very eye opening. So
And it typically is, and it makes you, when you talk to people about their experience, it makes you think and eye opening and stuff like, oh, this normal thing that you think is just completely normal is not okay. And you learn to be more sensitive of other people and what they go through. Anything
yes,
else you want to speak on those, or you're good?
I'm good. Unless you want me to talk about my master's class books, but those are pretty cut and dry.
I think I'm good. Although I'm probably talking to you once I finally, I hope that I'll getting my master's soon. I'm thinking about it, and when I do, I can go on to you about all those books. But that could be off air because I'm pretty sure it's very boring for the audience here.
Oh yes.
All right, so we're gonna go into my recent reads, and I recently read two books, and I'll go into my first one, which is The Lady of the River by of the Rivers, Philippa Gregory. And Philippa Gregory is been touted kind of as like the queen of like historical monarchy fiction in England, because she wrote like the other Boleyn Girl and wrote all those Tudor stories, and has written stories before and after the Tudors. So this originally is the third book in the Cousins War trilogy, or I don't know how many books are in there. It originally was a trilogy. I think she expanded it and stuff, but she recently has named the series like the Plantagenet and Tudor series, and has put each book in chronological order of when the events happen, even if the she wrote it before or after. So even though this is originally the third book, it chronologically goes first. So this one is about, and I don't know the French pronunciation. We were joking earlier that it's jaqueta, which in Spanish means jacket, but and I'm sure that's probably a common French name, and I'm just over here being ignorant. But this book is about Jaquetta of Luxembourg, and she's the Duchess of Bedford, and also in history is the mother who would be Queen Elizabeth, wife of King Edward IV, and grandmother of Edward V and Richard, Duke of York, the two boys who died in the London Tower and the War of the Roses. And also, she's the grandmother of Queen Elizabeth of York. So she, even though herself was never queen or royalty or anything of like that, she did end up having her heirs become royalty. So that her kids are spoken of like, this lady is pregnant every year. She has like 14 kids. Like each time I was like, I can't imagine now with the technology and the medicine and the science we have now to be pregnant that many times, but to be pregnant that many times back then. But anyway,
Same.
it is absolutely insane. And one thing I like about Philippa Gregory is she takes history and puts it in the female perspective. So each character that she has in all of the books that I've read of hers so far is always a female protagonist. And so I know in high school and other like middle school, elementary school as well, like when we learn about history, it's usually typically through the male lens. And so even though this is a historical fiction and therefore like the events that happened are correct, but you don't actually know what these people said to one another, and that's where the historical fiction comes in. But I like the fact that we're seeing the lens of what this time period was like through a woman's eyes, and that these women who were smart and who were able to shape history had to do it in a side kind of conniving, convince their husbands, convince their brothers, their uncles, their children, their male children to do things so that way they can get themselves ahead because they themselves couldn't do it alone. And so this book has historical figures such as King Henry the Sixth, so the son of King Henry V, who ended up being able to become the first king of England and France. His son ends up messing that up, and they jokingly say that in history that who knows if France would still be under English rule today if he didn't lose the French at that time. So just imagine that. And it has his wife, Queen Margaret of Anjou, who she herself is French. So there's a lot of like the English royal bloodline has a lot of English and French kind of mixed together because England and France were always at war with each other. That the way that they solved their like a war or a faction or trying to come up is like, oh, we'll just marry each other off. But then they ended up like, even though they were married, they ended up going back to war with each other over and over again. So they never learned.
So a typical marriage, just
Typical,
right.
yeah. And as I mentioned in last week's episode, if you haven't checked that out yet, so definitely go do that. That like I really love looking at the English monarchy, just the fact of having a monarchy as a system, like as an American, like just to think about the fact of a monarchy being the well back then head of government, now not so much, it's more of a I don't want to say figurehead, but in a sense. And the fact that whether it's back then or now, there's all this juicy, scandalous drama to take in from the British royals, and I think that's why I'm so drawn to it. And that it's not just history, but it's also like the the War of the Roses is what made George R. R. Martin decide to write Game of Thrones, and other fantasies that are written have come from the English monarch of this time. So I think of like all the fantasy books that I like that take in elements of the British royalty, and I think that's why I like going into the British royalty of that time, and also now because I've been watching The Crown, as I mentioned last week, and I've told both Ben, our wonderful producer, and Dakota off camera that I love The Crown on Netflix. And I'll go into my second book. I just finished it today. I was listening to it on the Libby app, which, if you are in the US, you can get for free with a library card. And that is A Promised Land by Barack Obama. Now, I just want to say how nice it was to listen to a competent president because he is the voice of the book as well, so he is doing the voice reading his book in the audiobook. And that was real nice. And it was interesting to listen to a memoir of a presidency that I was alive and coherent to remember, because Dakota and I were both born during Clinton's presidency, but
Yeah.
both of us were way too young to remember anything that went on. We know of Clinton's presidency kind of more in the hindsight way, the way with other presidencies that we weren't alive for, that we read in our books,
It's
kind of
it,
thing.
it's almost the same with the George Bush presidency. We know about it, we lived through it, but we were so young, we don't really
Yeah,
know a whole lot about it.
kind of because I'm 1994. You're 93, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we were a little bit older for Bush. There's things we remember of Bush. I remember exactly where I was when 9/11 happened. But I think the first presidency that we paid attention to was Obama,
Yeah.
because that was from freshman year, because you and I are both 2012 graduates, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So from freshman year all the way to when I was supposed to graduate, Dakota graduated on time. I didn't. Of college was the Obama years, and those I enjoyed listening to him and talking about things that both I agreed with him on and things that I didn't agree with him on. And I think it's good to listen to memoirs of presidents, whether you agree with them or not, and listen to, even if you are mostly on his side. Like with me, he was supposed. I won't go into the story, but he was supposed to be the first president I voted for. But Tennessee messed that up for me. I was a Tennessee resident. We don't need to go into that. But he would have been my first time voting for president if it worked out, but it didn't. But that even though like I agreed with him on a lot of things, and there's things I didn't, and there's other presidents that I agree with less, but still always have like one or two things that I agree with. And I think it's always good to go into not just the president's histories of way back then, but also go into our recent president's histories and learn from those and see what was done then that has shaped what is going on right now. Like there's a few policies that Obama had that I hope was seemed like it was the good start of going forward in this country, that I hope, like, I think one of the examples I put in is like the ACA hopefully can turn into Medicare for all, eh,
Yeah.
or DACA can turn into these, because they're not kids anymore, these adults
Yeah.
actually getting US citizenship because this is the only country they know. And so these are things that he started that maybe weren't as left as we would like or as some people would like, but is the starting point to go forward in the right direction. So it was cool listening to his book. And weirdly, like, this is a two-part book. It's a duology, because he jokes in his forward that he's like, maybe a better writer could have wrote this all in one book, but he's like, I had too much to say. And I was like, of course. And so he ends the first book really with the assassination of bin Laden. So that's where it ends, and that's the ending part. And I'm just excited for the next one, even though like I lived through it and that was my the next like book is going to be when I was even more aware because it's college. Because I know we were aware in high school, but we weren't as aware as we were when we were in college. Because again, we were adults then and still children while we were in high school. But yeah, it's definitely a great memoir. I definitely recommend for people our age, even people older, even people younger. Like, and listening to it on audiobook is great. I was listening to it at work, so I was doing my work listening to Obama. It's a, I think it's about like 20 something hours of the audiobook, so it takes a little while, but it's good. It's definitely good. So we're gonna go into our next topic, which is our recent TV watch. I didn't have anything this week for a recent TV watch, so we're gonna go into what Dakota has recently watched. So go ahead, Dakota.
So I've been kind of on a nostalgia kick lately, and I'm not gonna say when I started rewatching it, but I rewatched the series for the show Scrubs, and which, if you guys don't know, Scrubs is a comedy that it is in a hospital. The doctors on the first episode start brand new day, completely scared, out of their minds. And it goes through the main series goes through 8 years of their journey to the hospital. And then the ninth season, it's interesting. It kind of the hospital turns into like a med school, and you see some med students come into play. Um, and the the show, although it being an older show, it is even more relevant today than it was back then. There are some many lessons at the end of episodes. One of the iconic things about the show is that the main character, JD, always kind of looks off in the distance and daydreams, and he has this nice little quote to sum up a life lesson. Um, it's just a good show. You get in the feels, and because spoiler alert, some people die, and some people break up, and it's just very unexpected. It's a great show to revisit. And then after I watched that, I started looking at Rick and Morty because I was a little sad from the ending of it. So I was like, I need something a little more goofy. And then so I just love Rick and Morty. I actually rewatched the Pickle Rick episode um, yesterday. I'm a pickle Rick. One of my favorite episodes. Um, and so I've just been kind of rewatching that just to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. And and the last one, Mr. Iglesias, which they just came out with a new season, like part season today. It has Gabriel Iglesias and a couple other um, actors with him. He is a history teacher in a school in California. And of course, you know, Gabriel Iglesias, he's a hilarious comedian. He's even a more hilarious actor. And if I will say, going through school, if I could be a teacher half as inspiring and even hilarious as him to my students, or if I had a teacher like that, Lord knows the things that we could achieve. Because even though it's a cheesy comedy, some of the like life lessons he puts in there is very amazing. Um, and again, you're gonna laugh your butt off the whole time because it's Gabriel Iglesias.
No, I saw him in Nashville,
Ah,
and
lucky.
it was really good. And what was really funny, so he did his new work, but then
Hmm.
at the end, he was like, okay, I'm going to do some of my older jokes. And everyone in the audience was saying the jokes with him. And he was just like, this must be what it was like to be a Beatle. He was just like, everyone singing back to you your songs. He goes, you guys, I don't even need to be up here. You can tell my jokes for me.
I'll just sit down and let you guys come up here and tell it.
Which is funny. That also happened. So I also saw Kendrick Lamar's Damn tour in Nashville,
Okay.
and his song "Humble." That was the last song that he did, and he had to do it two times because the first time, like we're all singing along with him. He puts the mic to the audience, kind of like, you know how artists do. But then we kept going and we sang the whole song. And he basically, like, he was in shock that we knew all the lyrics because, like, the CD had just come out. It was one of his, like, the first tour of it. And, like, we're all just sitting there, we're singing along to it, we're rapping along to it in the audience. And he's just like, Nashville's some real ones. I fuck with y'all. We gonna do that again. And then he rapped the song himself the second time.
I don't I don't even know how I would feel to be that kind of person, to just have to say something and everyone just know exactly what I'm gonna
Yeah,
say. Like, that just must be one of those surreal moments, like, holy
yeah,
crap, I've
yeah.
made it.
It was cool, and I think not that I'll ever be that famous or that popular, but both you and I were band kids. We've done marching band. We've had the as I joke when in college goes, it doesn't matter what we sound like. We're playing to drunk people. Like,
Yes.
but you have the drunk crowd that's there for the football going along cheering with you as you're playing, and it's one of like the coolest things in the world. So to actually like see in him what you see in like the other kids in marching band or in band that like are there and just they see it, you see it, and
Yes.
it was cool to see it on his face, even though I was not in the front row, I was in the nosebleed. You could still see it on his face.
That is impressive.
Yeah, it was cool. But anything more on those shows? Or are you good?
Um, go watch them. They're start with Mr. Iglesias because that is the more modern one, and go watch them. They're hilarious and sometimes eye opening, like with some of the episodes of Scrubs.
Is Scrubs also on Netflix? Because I know Mr. Iglesias and Rick and Morty are.
Scrubs is on Hulu. They
Okay.
have all 9 seasons of it. And like I said, the first eight's the normal season, and then they tried to reboot it with 9, and it was okay.
So not ninth season not needed.
You can watch it just to see what they tried to do. It's not bad. It's just not what the show was.
Yeah. So it's one of those kind of like a Godfather 3 where it's not a bad movie, but it's following Godfather 1 and 2. So
Yeah,
okay. Which I think we've talked about a bunch on this, that, and then like Spider-Man as well. Like Spider-Man 3 is following Spider-Man 1 and 2, which were way better. So it's always having to be as good or better as your predecessor.
exactly. Yeah.
And sometimes that's really hard. Because we saw that with Game of Thrones last season. We don't have to get into it, but I know people have some feelings about that last season. Okay, so we're gonna go into our recent movies watched. Dakota, what have you recently watched movie wise?
Okay, so because I've been binge watching these shows, I haven't watched a whole lot of movies, but I had to watch the movie Over the Moon. It's on Netflix. It is about trying not to go into a whole lot of spoilers if people haven't seen it. There's a young lady who essentially she's trying to find the moon goddess, and some sad things happen that again I won't spoil for you guys. Um, and she eventually meets the moon goddess. She learns that there's a little twist onto her attitude on the moon, and she gets to meet all of these different characters. And of course, there's a bunny rabbit in it, which is pretty cool. Um, and a ping pong match, which is also pretty cool. And so, again, I'm trying not to spoil it. Uh, there's some really good singing in it. I know if you guys have ever seen Hamilton, Philippa Sue, who
Philippa Sue, I love her.
yes, she is the moon goddess, and so she sings a couple songs in there, and it's just beautiful. And
I
actually,
love her voice. Her voice is
it is
just
so beautiful. Um, actually, our choir teacher at my middle school, she saw it before me, and I heard her singing and listening to the songs, and that kind of got me intrigued to watch the movie. So, if for anything, at least watch it to hear Eliza singing about a moon goddess. So it was pretty. It was a cute movie, and I'm glad I watched it.
Yeah, I want to go into the irony here of so I like as an adult like watching cartoons. And Dakota is probably the person that I know likes scary movies the most out of anyone. Whereas like I have friends who like scary movies, but Dakota will literally watch any scary movie out there. He and so even though technically in hindsight, my movie that I watched this week, and it's not really scary, but the fact that I did a scary movie and you did a cartoon was pretty funny.
It is different. I will say that.
Yes. So we're gonna go into my movie that I watched this past week, and that is A Quiet Place. Now, I was the reason I had to watch A Quiet Place is because I'm also on Pop Culture Universe YouTube channel. Go check that out. We had a if we had 1,000 views on one of our episodes, that me and another person on the show had to watch A Quiet Place because both of us are scaredy cats and don't like scary movies. So they told us, "Oh, we'll give you this easier one to watch." So in hindsight, it was not scary, but I did watch it with the lights on. And
You,
like I was even folding my laundry too, but there was moments that I had to like stop and pay attention because again they're doing sign language, so you had to read the subtitles.
is that the one with John? Is it Krasinski?
Yeah, and Emily Blunt.
Gotcha. Okay, you gotta watch them with the lights off. That's the best part.
Yeah, but after I watched it, I was like, oh man, I actually wish that I watched this in theaters because I could see like just the sound where like I was pretty close to the TV, probably closer than I should have been, but it's because like I'm rearranging my room, so my TV is literally like right here off screen, so it was where I was sitting, TV there, like doing my laundry on the table that I have right here, and so I got to hear probably if I was sitting farther away from the TV that even when they were doing the sign language, they were whispering a little bit, which I think you would hear it more clearly in the movie theater. But at home, you probably might not hear that unless you were as close to the TV as I was. Especially with like, I live on a main road, so a lot of times I'll hear traffic or all of that while I'm watching things. So you don't always catch things. That's why a lot of times I watch things with subtitles just in case. It's either because of that or if I'm watching something that like is set in England and sometimes the accent, depending on what part of England they're in, it's just like, what did that person say? So I enjoyed the movie. There's parts in it. There's one part that I'm just gonna say with a nail. I'm not gonna spoil, but it's with a nail. A little like and what happens in that like part of the movie, that was me going, no.
That is always my reaction in scary movies when something like, no, don't do that. Don't be dumb.
Like, because the thing is, they show you they do a good part of like previewing what's going to or something's gonna happen. So like they close up on this thing, you're like, oh no, and then as she's going down the stairs, I was like, she's gonna, and then it happens, and I was like, ah! So you could tell that probably I shouldn't have watched it in theater because I was talking to the screen. I think that's the main thing. With scary movies, I'm going to be that rude moviegoer that is talking to the screen because I want the characters to be intelligent.
Yes. Oh God.
And I think with me, I respect the movie theater experience so much that I don't want to do that to other people. So yeah, like when you're in the movie theaters, don't be on your phones. Stay quiet. Like if you have to whisper something to your friend, that's fine. But like most of the time, shut up when you're in the theater. And I know that with me during scary movies, that won't be me. So I typically, if I ever do watch them, which I think I've watched like I could probably count it on one hand how many scary movies I watched.
We need to fix that more. You need to watch more.
I know. Dakota, when we were roommates in college, he'd be like, "Oh, I'm watching this," and I was like, "You have fun with that. I'm gonna go to my room." But yeah, we're gonna go into our anything extra. Dakota, what is your anything extra this week?
Okay, so I have a couple. Um, of course, along with watching scary movies and nostalgia, I like playing video games. Um, Soul has mentioned the whole having to teach virtually and everything with the pandemic. So human contact has not been a whole lot here. So I've been searching for games that I can play with friends that are socially distanced or in different houses and even in different states. Um, so there is something called Jackbox, which is amazing. If any of you have never heard of it, I suggest going. You can play it on PC, PlayStation, Xbox,
On your phone?
Switch. Yes, on your phone. It's amazing. So what it is, they have party packs, and so Jackbox 7 was the last one I played with a couple of my teacher friends, and they download the game. There's a host that will start it, and if you're in the same room, you can do that, or you can stream it. And I've done that before. And all you do is it'll come up with a room code, and then you just get a phone, a tablet, whatever, put your name, put the code, and you pop in and you can play. And the cool thing about it is you can play all of these games, like I said, through a stream. I can be up here in Kentucky, Soul could be down there in Florida, um, and we can play the game together. It's really cool. They have all of these interesting games. There's like always a drawing game almost on these packs, which I'm horrible at. Um, there's one that's called Quiplash, which some of you may have.
Lashes.
It's so fun. Um, you also get to see a real insight into people with Quiplash. Um, and
And
then
sometimes when you play with people that aren't like you don't know very well, you're like, how real am I gonna get? Like,
exactly,
how much do I want
exactly.
these people to know about me?
Exactly. And that 7 has something called devil. It's something with devils, and like you have to act human on it. And so you have these tasks, and at first we were like, "Oh, this is going to be boring." But what's really cool, you get on it and you ask your friends for help like, "So, I need help. Tell me the directions." And while they're doing that, you get house points. And you can also have bad tasks, and if you do that, it can take away points. And it's just a really cool game. It's really intense. And then I think my favorite off of there, it's almost like communications 101, but very interesting twist to it. You come up with 3 prompts for a speech, and then with that, it sends randomly to people. They pick it, and then for each round, you're the speaker and you have someone assisting you. So they pick a word slide, and then they pick a picture that you have to talk about. And it kind of cycles through based on what your assistant picks, and everyone can rate you. So that's another telling one to see who how each person really is.
And I can say, like, for me, I am a good drawer. I do not draw with my finger on the thing. It always looks so bad. And I'm like, why is this not? I think I need a bigger tablet to do it because I was drawing on my phone and it was not working out. But speaking of of not just Quiplash, but of this party pack Jackbox 7. So when this first came out, I played it on Dakota doesn't know these people, but for those of you who are watching who follow the Schmodown, I was on Winston's Twitch stream when it came out, and I was playing along. And with the Devil one, it's fun to play, but it's not good to watch people play on Twitch.
Yeah.
Literally, like in your phone, like, hey, I need to do this. You're just like focusing on your phone, so it's not fun to watch people do it as much, but it's very fun to play.
So it's a great thing. And again, any of the party pack games, I think I have number 6 on my PlayStation. Um, It's a really fun to play. I actually, as a reward at the end of last school year for some of my kids, we spent some time and we played some Jackbox. It was very interesting and fun, and the kids who participated really enjoyed it. Um, so I would recommend looking into those. They're not expensive games, and like I said, they're
I think
hilarious.
the most expensive is like somewhere between like $20 and $30. So
Yeah,
much
something like
cheaper
that.
than other video games.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so another video game that I do enjoy playing, it's Overwatch. And again, some of my students, when we have free time, we'll talk about games, and I'm like, "Oh, I play Overwatch," and I get some responses like, "Oh, I can't believe you play that," and some that are like, "Yeah." Um, if you don't know Overwatch, you have the slew of characters that was just put up on the stream. Um, you can choose from them. It's normally like 5 versus 5 most of the time. You have different objectives. You go against the teams. You either move a payload, you capture a point, things of that nature. Um, you get to choose between being what's called a tank, a DPS or damage person, or a healer. Um, no shock to Soul, probably, but I most of the time end up being a healer. Um, and I've been kind of playing that off on and off. It's again, it's a fun game. It's more fun when you have a group of people to play with because you can make plays with them. If you're playing by yourself and you just want to be a jerk, there's some characters that freezes people. I love it. Her name's May, one of my favorite characters to be a jerk with. Um, it's
You're
just
being a jerk during video games? What?
right. But I love spamming people with her, and there's another character named Symmetra who throws turrets that shoot lasers at people. It's a fun game. I've played it for a couple years now, and I just I just love playing it. Um, and so that game wise, that's kind of my other stuff. Um, and then music wise, which I do teach music, and I've kind of randomly been going through YouTube some days, kind of listening to things, and I came across, I cannot pronounce her last name, so I'm just gonna say she's a one name person like Prince. Um, I came across an artist. Her name is Neta, and she is Israeli, and that's a beautiful picture. Um, she is from Israeli, and she actually was 2018's Eurovision champion, song music contest champion. And I kind of wish I had found her sooner. She uses a loop recorder. She can record herself singing different parts and different vocals and everything, and she can kind of sing with herself. Um, and I went
Kind of
back.
like in Pitch Perfect 3, the
Yeah,
final
kind of.
song there. Yeah.
Um, and so in the Eurovision contest, she kind of became like this big feminist icon. Like she did a remake of Barbie Girl that almost sounded like a depressed Barbie. Like she was sad that everyone was kind of playing around with her. She did a What is Love that wasn't upbeat. Again, it was very sad, like very like you could feel the emotion in it. And one of her iconic songs from there was Toy, which essentially it's she's saying women are not the toys of men or anyone else. And she actually says in the song, "I'm not your toy, you silly boy," or whatever.
Is
Very
she
like
singing in English or Hebrew?
English mostly.
Uh,
Every now and then she slips into different languages. Um, and so that the picture you saw actually is of her singing Toy. Um, and one of her songs after the Eurovision contest, the one that I actually found second, because I found like a Disney remake she did. Um, Go figure, Disney would tie me into a new singer. Um, it's called Basa Sababa, and I've done a little research on it, and she's done interviews, and apparently Basa Sababa is Arabic slang for bummer, comma cool.
Hmm.
And the music video is intense. At the end of it, there's a twerking pink rhino. It it's interesting.
That's what got you, didn't it?
Maybe I just wanted to see that twerking rhino. Um, but again, it's a very feminist thing. The whole video is her. It starts off her at a wedding altar. Lots of pink everywhere, um, and the man leaves her at the altar, and she ends up like walking around with like rhino horns and ends up turning into a rhino because rhinos have thick skin and are strong animals, and that's kind of what she wanted to portray to everyone. And some of her like her drummer and some of her backup dancers end up being like giant like bubble gum heads that end up bursting. It's
So an
interesting.
interesting video.
Yeah, an interesting video, but it's like when you listen to it, it's catchy. I've been singing it for the last like week, and it's
That reminds me of like the '90s videos, like or like early 2000s, like Missy Elliott. Like in
oh
one of her
yes,
songs, she
yeah,
took her head off, and then she's
yes,
singing from her head while she's dancing and stuff. Like,
yes.
so there's always crazy things that are happening. I love the music videos that have crazy stuff happening.
It and like the first time you watch it, you're gonna be like, "What did I just watch?" And you're gonna sit there, and then you're gonna have to watch it again because you're like, "I need to see what's going on." And it's just, I just love the power and the attitude she has when she's singing. It's so different. Like like I said, I wish I would have found her back in 2018 during this Eurovision contest because she is a fantastic singer.
Well, we'll have to ask 50 here, another special person on the Media Sweaties network, to see. He actually lives in Israel, and so
Okay.
we'll have to see if he knows who she is. So I'll probably ask him this Sunday when we get on our Get Sweaty episode this Sunday. But we'll go into mine, which is Tiffany Haddish ended up doing a comedy special TV show on Netflix, but it wasn't her doing comedy. It was her bringing up her friends. And so this one, she called it They Ready. Do you know how Tiffany Haddish is always like, she ready? So this one is They Ready. And the screen right here, this is Aida Rodriguez. And obviously she's the one I enjoyed the most out of all of them because, Latina. and and her comedy was funny, and like if you're not Latino, it's funny, but if you are Latino, her comedy set is super super funny. So she jokes, she goes, my mother's Puerto Rican, my father's Dominican, and my stepfather is Cuban, so I represent the entire Spanish speaking Caribbean. And she has this really funny story. I'm not gonna spoil it, about her father um, driving them to school. Her, not her father, but her stepfather, and just the fact that the like little part of goes, and then they knew he was Cuban because us Latinos, we have our flags everywhere. So it was really funny, just her going into just not just being Latino, but also being a Caribbean woman, and the fact, like, as you guys know, because I've probably mentioned it in every episode, I'm Cuban myself. So even though like she's Puerto Rican and Dominican, but it's still like they're next door neighbors to us. We might have some words that we say differently, but we're pretty much the same. If someone were to call me a Puerto Rican or Dominican, that would be much better than when we were up in Kentucky and people would be like, "You Mexican," and I'd be like, "Wrong. I am not Mexican. I don't know shit about Mexico."
It's actually funny because in Scrubs, one of the characters, her name's Carla Espinoza, and she's Dominican, and
Mhm.
her husband, Chris Turk, he always says that she's Mexican, and she always gets so mad at him.
See, I wouldn't marry anyone if they're gonna. I think this is something that I've talked about, like in other forums. It's just like sometimes too, like the racist comments that you get as a Latino outside of like Florida, and it's always like the Mexican terms, and I was just like, First off, you're being racist. Second off, your racism is wrong because I'm not even Mexican. So like I don't know who you're trying to offend here because those terms are not towards Cubans. So, but yeah, so it was. She's cool. She's really funny. It's a short episode. I think it's no more than 30 minutes. I think there's 6 different people that Tiffany Haddish brings up. She was the best of all of their sets, in my opinion. But again, as I said, I'm biased. But yeah, because this has been Soul Talk. I'm so excited to have brought Dakota here because, like I said, because we went to school together and he was my roommate. You were probably my longest roommate that I had.
Oh, we endured that first
We
one. Oh,
we went from apartment to apartment to then finally a house. Yeah, that was the best one. Was when we finally got to the house.
yes.
Yeah, but where can the people find you, Dakota?
So, obviously, I'm an old person, as my students would say. I'm on Facebook. You can find me at Dakota Compton. There's a nice little picture of me conducting my orchestra, and I look like Jesus pose, like T posing on a stand. It was a kind of cool picture. And you can also find me on Twitter at Compton for Kentucky 2022. That's my Twitter handle. Um, One thing that we didn't mention is I'm very big in politics. So if you want to follow me to kind of hear my takes on some politics in Kentucky, or just any politics in general, or want to ask me questions of what I know or anything of that nature, just follow me on Twitter, and I'll be willing to talk with anyone or about anything on there.
And do you want to tell them your position you have right now?
So, um, I live in a tiny little city, um, just off the side of Bowling Green called Plum Springs, and I've lived here for a little over a year. And back in November, I was elected as one of the 4 city commissioners for the Plum Springs City Commission this year. So I kind of stepped my foot in, and I'm trying to figure some things out with this little city government. So it's a new experience. It's very eye opening already.
And I know I've said this in a previous episode, but whatever side of the political spectrum you are on, always remember to vote. Always vote down ballot. So that means all the way to people like Dakota, this way, in a city commission. And but yeah, and we also have, I think the register's time is already passed. I think it was December 7th for Georgia. But if you are living
Yes.
in Georgia and you are a registered voter, please, 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 please go out and vote January 5th. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. Just go out and vote. And so I'm going to leave it there. Thank you guys so much. You guys know where to find me. Soul Govin on Twitter, at soul.k.govin on Instagram. We'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.